From Lusaka to the world, we're turning up the mic. Truth with no filter, cutting through the hype. C&H, bringing light to the dark. With every word, they're igniting the spark.
Welcome to the Real Talk, the podcast that promotes real talk and real growth. Today's topic is a very powerful one, and before we go to the topic at hand, allow the two of us to introduce ourselves. My name is Cyprian Katongo Jr., and at this particular time, allow my co-host to introduce himself also.
Good afternoon, everyone, and my name is Hussein Dodia. I'm a co-host of Real Talk of CNH, and good afternoon.
Today being episode 15, the topic at hand, we're looking at leadership, lessons learned, and pillars of sustainable development. At this particular time, allow my co-host to break down the context of what we'll be discussing. Over to you, Mr. Dodia.
Thank you, Mr. Katongo. Basically, the outline of our topic is looking at sustainable development and how we can bring it about within the nation that is Zambia. We are focusing on Zambia because this is our country, and we would like to see the other areas industrialize just as much as other areas have. So I think this topic outlines the importance of what not to do in terms of development and the lessons that we have learned from the past since independence, and what we can do from now and into the future. Thank you very much.
Powerful outline there. I think we can get straight into the topic at hand. I think the lessons learned, just to add on what Mr. Dodia said there, embracing adaptability and also flexibility. You mentioned a good point there to say from when Zambia got independence until now, we're looking at that. And this headline is looking at the importance of being open to change and adjusting strategies as needed when it comes to, like you mentioned, short and long-term strategies which can make the economy develop. And also the aspect of building strong relationships and networks. We see that in as much as Zambia needs to be developed, whereby everyone, like we always talk about on our podcast, that even people in the rural areas need to be included in the developmental process. So I think, just to add on to what Mr. Doja said, building strong relationships and networks. When it comes to also leadership, we'll also briefly tackle on integrity and ethics, because leadership, I think it's important that these two, are also discussed, as in Mr. Doja mentioned there. Then the pillars of sustainable development. Here we're going to look at economic growth and prosperity, social inclusion and also equity, and environmental protection and conservation, just to give more to what Mr. Doja mentioned. At this particular time, I'll allow him also now to break down this powerful topic, because I'm seeing already prepared to just sip and give me the floor and talk. Over to you, Mr. Doja.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. I think Mr. Katongo has broken it down for us, but I would also just like to add a much macro view of what maybe we'll be discussing. In terms of the lessons learned, I want us to be looking at the mining sector and the strengthening dollar. And I think this is one of the issues that has been the crux of national development since independence. Our obsession on having a strong kwacha and relying on copper exports has sort of deprived other industries of growth. And we'll get into that in details as we move forward. But I just want to give an outline. And in terms of the other aspect, we have this Dutch disease of our reliance on mining. So that has sort of crippled our economy in one aspect or the other, in the sense that, as we had mentioned in the last episode, there is a strong import dependence as Zambia, and therefore our export market is relatively weak. So with a strong kwacha, it brings in a lot of imports But you also need to know that when you are bringing in those imports, you're making Zambian products less valuable. So in this sense, what I mean is that you're making them less marketable. The fact that you bring in more imports means that your country, your economy relies on these foreign imports. Therefore, us as Zambians are not manufacturing anything, and therefore relying on most of our produce from outside, which should be the opposite. So under lessons learned, that is the aspect that I want to focus on, because I think it's important that we need to understand this dynamic. You know, I hear a lot of people, even now, as the dollar has gone down, or the kwacha has strengthened, people are saying, "Oh yeah, that's good, that's great." Yes, I know a good competitive currency is good, but you must also look at what effects it can do to the rest of the economy. So with our dollar going down, I can only explain that through major copper and mineral exports. I cannot say that is a result of our economy doing better, because I do not see our economy doing better. We're still experiencing load shedding and other aspects that we have talked about. So I think it's important that we move away from that mindset. The mindset of the kwacha increases, that means our economy is going to be in a better place. That is not necessarily the case unless there is growth accompanying that change. If your economy is solely reliant on copper exports to manage your exchange rate, then you have a problem. And this is the problem that I believe that we have been facing consistently. And we need to start reevaluating how we look at the dynamics of our country. Do we still want to be heavily mineral export dependent and then end up a mining pit in the next 20 to 30, maybe 50 years? As we know already, the mines are already doing devastating damage to our agricultural land, to our water supplies, to our livestock. So we need to look at the measures, firstly, of how, like Mr. Katongo mentioned, environmental measures of how we can curb these activities and make them sustainable for the long term and the very far future. And we also need to look at how we can diversify our economy and provide more strength in other areas, which is what is needed, because Zambians need jobs now. We are 20 million Zambians and we're only growing, yet many of our Zambian people are in poverty or out of job. So I think it's important that now we're reaching a time where we need to start realizing and start thinking critically about the skills that we need to impart on future generations, and to ensure that they have a sustainable living and a future to look forward to. Thank you very much.
Very powerful take. Let me pose this question to you, Sir Dodia. We're still looking at the points you mentioned there, which are very important. I think, having said, just to add on and supporting your points there, the importance of being open to change and adjusting strategies, like I mentioned, that we shouldn't be dependent on the mining sector only. We should also think about other sectors, improving other sectors. At this particular time, I think the listener also is willing to, that listeners out there wants to know what strategies can be used when it comes to, making the economy not be dependent on the mining sector only. Over to you, Mr. Dodia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. And I think that's a very important question, because we cannot just state problems without solutions, isn't it? So I think it's important, like we've mentioned before, that we need to funnel a lot of resources into developing these other industries. I know it won't be cheap. I don't expect it to be cheap, but it's expected to be done at some point. And I think the near future, it will need to be achieved for us to be sustainable as Zambia as a nation, and for our people to be actually to be prospective. My ideas around it would center around, firstly, this obsession with having a strong currency should be out of place. Okay? Yes, it's important to have a competing currency internationally, but that's if also you're an exporter and an importer. You know what I mean? Your currency needs to be all over the world. It needs to be traded all over the world for you to care that much. I think Zambia, being a small nation, yes, we heavily trade in copper, but there are other industries that we can exploit. I'll give an example, a simple example of China. China has used it doesn't have much land mass, but it's used its population to service the world. And how do I mean like this? They're located in almost every industry. They're in manufacturing, they're in production, they're in IT, because they have the ability to create on a large, massive scale, right? And this goes for clothing, whatever apparel you can think of, gadgets, electronics, everything we buy now is probably made in China, isn't it? Yes. So they have used their population to their advantage. What do we have in Zambia? We have minerals, we have vegetables, we have crops, we have livestock, we have what do we call these rocks that are used, phosphorus rocks, to use to make drugs, right? Trees. So all these, we should be looking at Zambia now and looking at where is our strength, where are the low-hanging fruits? The low-hanging fruits are in our natural resources. For us to be able to compete internationally and globally and to siphon away from the mining sector, I believe we should go into production management. When I mean production management, I mean fresh goods such as livestock, produce, vegetables, beans, anything that we grow locally on a large scale. Wheat, cotton, tobacco. We have these companies that deal in these commodities, but you find they're usually owned by individuals or a small group of farmers or a syndicate, right? Even that wealth is not shared amongst the people. So I think it's important that this is now where we can provide value addition for our people. Our people have always been farmers. We've always been good livestock rearers. We're miners. So these are the industries that we can branch off into. And even mining itself. Like, I'm not saying that we should totally neglect it, but there are ways that we can reinvent the system. I'm very impressed with what the government has done in terms of artisanal mining. They've provided miners with the ability to mine and claim those resources and sell them. But the truth is, what happens is that because of desperation and poverty, they usually sell it at a very low price. So how do you ensure that value addition is provided to the people directly, right? So this is where now you can form associations, right? Gold association, silver association, magnesium association, and you fix the price, right? You say this is the price that emeralds will be bought at. This is the price that gold will be bought at. This is the price that silver will be bought at. But even those companies should not be in the business of exporting. They should be in the business of value addition, right? Making chains, making rings, making this, making that. That way, even the export value becomes much, much higher. So in all the industries, we need to have some sort of production mechanism. I wouldn't call it manufacturing. I would say production, because I feel that Zambia would compete better in the global market in terms of food. Providing food type items to the African market and to the global market, because this is what we're good at, right? We have orange trees, we have avocados, we have cows, we have goats, we have chickens, we have basically everything in Zambia. So I believe that's a very strong market for us to enter into and to provide to the international market, and I feel that we can compete not just locally but even globally. Thank you.
You have powerfully outlined the importance of, on this podcast, we'll have to give facts which can be beneficial to the people. Because on our podcast, we'll have to be practical. We hate misleading people. Having said that, let me bring back a question also, which I'm curious to hear from you, Mr. Dodia. Having put in place, like you have mentioned, Zambia being a leader in terms of production, which at the end of the day means that there'll be money which can be, let me put it, funded in other industries or sectors.
Exactly.
Which at the end of the day we see a situation whereby everyone as a source of capital to start with. Now, I want to pose this question. How can the mindset of abusing funds which are pumped into the aspect of corruption, how can corruption be tackled, having put those measures in place? But how can we have an effective corruption fight in the long term? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. In my view, can I give you my points?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. In my view, the only if corruption is rampant, let's say for what we're taking we're using Zambia, isn't it? Because we want to be practical. We have a situation where there's corruption in almost every industry, right? So in order to curb that, I believe if you can set up laws that ensure citizens fight in corruption. I was very taken aback when we spoke last time and you said the citizens should join in the fight. And I remember clearly saying that citizens at the grassroots level, it's a bit difficult, right? But imagine if you could make it possible through law. If you could tell citizens that those who are involved, those who catch out, whistleblowers basically, who catch out those involved in corruption will not pay tax. Can you imagine the impact that it would have on people? People would start actually catching corrupt people. Their mission while they are working would be to catch corruption, and they almost immediately, I believe, within a year or two, you would be able to phase out corrupt practices in those industries. But like I said, even as we're starting, and I think it's a very important question, because I think even as we're starting, those laws should be enforced from the very beginning. I know we already have the cybersecurity law, we have all these, the CPC, Criminal Procedure Code, we have all these acts and laws that deal with crimes, right? But if we can center one around corruption, like you have mentioned, where it is beneficial, it is more beneficial to the citizen to catch the corruption than to not, then you can flip the tables. You see what I mean? Yeah. Because as a citizen, if you remove things like, let's say, no tax on imports, it means for the rest of your life you won't pay tax on anything that you import. You know what I mean? You can import cars for your family, for your who. I mean, I don't think there's any deal that can get better than that, even though you're greedy. So I think you have to create a system where the citizens can play an active role. It's legal, and on top of that, they're adding it's benefiting them, because I don't believe any human being does anything for the sake of doing it. There's always some sort of how does this help me? You know what I mean? So if that's the current world we're dealing in, you need to make the incentive of catching corruption much more beneficial than not catching it, than receiving that bribe on the side. You see what I mean? So I think that would be the main way to deal with corruption, especially in an industry that was going to grow expansively like that. Because like you said, you cannot watch every aspect, right? We can introduce these mechanisms, but they'll still find a way, isn't it? As long as there's big money moving, corruption will exist, right? So we need to set in place from the very outset a foundation of laws, systems, policies, where that if you engage in corruption, it's going to really screw you up. And those that catch you in the corrupt act are going to benefit substantially. So I believe that would be the trick to it. Thank you.
Yeah, powerfully outlined. That's the beauty of the Real Talk with CIDH. You're always talking about real talk and promoting growth at the end of the day. Yes. Let's briefly look at building strong relationships and networks. Having put in mechanisms which are able to fight corruption effectively. Your take briefly on this one. I know you have a different point towards the lessons learned, but I think for the listener out there, I think it's important also to, having looked at the fight against corruption, I think we can look at now building strong relationships, whereby, like I mentioned earlier, even abuse of funds, they are not there. So I want to get your take. Also building strong relationships and networks in terms of developing Zambia.
Thank you very much. In terms of building strong relationships and networks, I believe we should have, by now, we should reach a system of unity. And as Zambians, we should realize that we're not separated by tribe, by ethnicity, by color, by race. We should realize at this point that as long as we're living in this country and we're one Zambia, one nation, we need to do what the best is for us. So I think in that aspect is more of education, as we are doing now with the Real Talk with CNH. I think the best way to get it across people is to be educated about their country. Most importantly, you need information before you can make decisions. So to provide as much information to people, to tell them the downward risks of everything is very important, because I know that even as a salesman, you only market the good side, right? Oh, this is the benefit. This is the benefit. No one ever says this is the downside. And it's understandable. That's the way you market a product. But this is our country. Remember, this is not a game that we're playing. This is a gamble with our lives, with our futures, with our children's futures. So we need to make sure that we're not playing a gambling game, that we understand the risks that we're taking. So in my observation, in terms of making networks, it's very important, but it's also important to have a good source of information from NGOs, from CSOs, from the government itself on what's actually happening on the ground. I think it's important that we are more active in what's actually happening with our people, in what's happening in the provinces, it's what's happening in the constituencies, all the way to the ward. There should be this active involvement of between citizens and government, this sort of synergy. This is one thing I was actually telling my madam the other day. I was saying, there's one thing that impresses me about Americans is that they are so responsive to their citizens. Despite them being different, liking wars and doing this and doing that, if one thing Americans are, is they're responsive to their people. So I believe that's the state we need to reach into first. We can't have this thing of, no, let's benefit this guy before we benefit our people. Let's benefit this guy before we benefit, or let's just help him out. But what about your people? So I think first priority is networking with your people, creating a spirit of unity amongst the Zambian people, realizing that we each have our own strength, just like God gave us. So some people will be good at farming, others will be good at fishing, others will be good at livestock rearing, others will be good at some sort of activity, ranching, keeping horses or something. So it's important that we recognize all our strengths and see how we can pull them together and benefit each other as a country. So I believe that's where we should start in terms of networking.
And finally, before we look at the pillars of sustainable development, I'll also throw back to you, because in a position whereby we, on this podcast, your powerful points are always, in line with what's happening in Zambia, which I think is very important. Leading with integrity and ethics. The importance of integrity and ethics in leadership decision making. I want to get your take on that one.
Okay. I believe we have discussed this before, but just in the context of this position as we're discussing, in terms of lessons learned. In our previous episode, we had looked at the history of Zambia, and we have seen the changes that have affected Zambia since independence. And the question that comes into mind is, where do these issues stem from, right? And I'm not going to lie to you, Mr. Katongo. These issues stem from the leaders. You need to have a spirit or a heart of patriotism, a heart of unity, a heart for your people. And I'm not saying this in the most cliche way, because I know that's the way other people understand it because of politics. But you really need to be that person who says that I am going to put my people first. And it works. The thing is that we know that it works. Xi Jinping has done it for China Vladimir Putin has done it for Russia. Donald Trump is doing it for the second time for Americans. And you know what's funny? Paul Kagame is doing it for Rwanda. But you know what's funny about this? Is that the whole world hates them, but their people love them. Why is that? That's the question that we should ask ourselves. We can all say, oh no, Kagame is a bad man, or Putin has been doing this and that and that. But when you ask the typical Russian, when you ask the typical Rwandese, when you ask the typical they have no problem in their country. Everything is going well. So I think when it comes to integrity and what was the other one you mentioned? Ethics. We should start to look at within first and look at ourselves first and say, look, are we really satisfying the needs of our people? If we're being brutally honest, are we really doing what's best? Are we really trying our best to do what's best for our people? And that is where the whole issue of integrity and ethics stems from. I cannot teach that, but I can say that the best people are not the brightest. They're not the guys with 20 PhDs and 5 master's degrees, and he's been to school his whole life and he knows everything in theory and he's had a bit of practice. I believe the best leaders are those that listen. You see, you need to be able to listen to your people and respond. Listen to your people and respond. Even if it's a negative response, you should be able to respond. You see? So this is where I believe we fall short, that we do not have that ability to, or maybe we are not taking on that accountability to respond. We have this idea that everything looks good on paper and in the next 5 years, and no, we have all these PhD guys sitting behind it and all these experts. But like we saw, from the first National Development Plan to the second to the third, people had unrealistic ideas of what they were going to expect. The truth is that you need to sit in realism. You need to sit with people. You need to engage with your people to actually know what's going on. You can't rely on some outsider who is saying, oh, this is the way it happened in our country, so now it can happen in yours. No, you need to understand dynamics. You need to understand, how do your people move? What embraces them? What makes them depressed? What makes them feel good? What makes them... You need to... And the only way you can do that is to be able to communicate with your people, to have a heart for your people, to feel the change, to feel remorse, to feel altruistic, to give, you see. So I believe that's where it starts from.
Let's look at the pillars of sustainable development. Over to you, Mr. Dodia. I'll just give you that floor also, to powerfully tackle them.
No, definitely. Thank you, Mr. Katongo. I know I've been talking too much here today.
It's important to lay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where we're coming from. Yeah. And I wanted, but it's, like you said, it's important to learn, and it's important for people to understand where we come from and what we have been doing and what we should do differently. Because I think we this thing of repeating your mistakes every time it's long gone. And you know, the more we do it, the more we damage ourselves. And now we're reaching a point where we can't do it anymore. If we make mistakes like that, we will end up in a horrible economy, a horrible country. So, moving on to the pillars, what can we do now, right? So, my first start would be the factors of production. Energy, transport, food, resource, natural resource. Energy, transport, food, natural resource. These are things that we need to sit down and start thinking carefully about on how we can cooperate them and make them industrious in Zambia. I really like the project that Mr. Sata started, King Cobra, our very own, under the Project 2000, when he was trying to build the network of roads around Zambia. That is actually a fantastic project. I'm really surprised they didn't go ahead with it. But anyway, that is where we need to start. We need to start looking at our energy sector, our health, energy sector, health sector, agriculture sector, our transport networks, and yes, and these 4 pillars of will form the basis of national development in the country.
Education.
And education as well. Thank you. 5 pillars actually. So when we start looking at these different pillars, we need to find a way to incorporate them and at the same time make Zambia industrious. Now, how do we do that? As we said, our main target is the mining sector, right? That's where the majority of our revenue comes in. So how do we target these separate industries individually? In my aspect, as we're talking right now, energy is the first. We do need electricity, 24 hours of electricity. Energy will begin to fuel other industries automatically. Small businesses, SMEs will start flourishing. Me and you who want to open our burger and takeaway will be able to do that because there's a constant supply of electricity. The risk factor has gone down. You are able to keep produce longer. So automatically when you have 24/7 energy, that becomes a major boost in your economic value. Secondly is obviously food. Food security, I believe, is very important. We need to start being able to buy up maize. We need to have the capacity to convert our resources into finished products, which we do have a few depots. But I think we can go further, especially as under FRA. We can do more to provide a sustainable food security basket for our people. We consume at least 3 million tons, almost 3 million tons of maize per year. So we need to find ways to ensure that food basket is maintained for our people. When we go to education, right? Education, once I don't believe that any person can get educated if they're hungry. I truly don't believe that. You cannot go and pay for education and you have not eaten. You haven't eaten in days. You would rather buy food, isn't it? So once you've dealt with energy and food, I think education can flourish. Will start to flourish. Will begin to flourish actually, because then you have a system where food is available. Electricity also means standard of living. You have water, you can run your TVs, you can do this, you can do that. So already quality of life changes with food and electricity. Just those two. It then generates interest in education. So now your kids can go to school, properly eating 3 meals a day, they're learning. And then also, as we discussed, it's the type of skills. I understand Teveta is still enrolling students under these skills programs, which is very good. But I think we should also find a way to introduce skills that will actually be beneficial in the future. AI learning tools, coding, battery manufacturing, nuclear energy, what do they call these? Robotics, mechanical engineering. So these are things that you can teach students, not obviously at a degree level, but as a base level to work with machines, with computers, with robotics, with batteries, to understand how they work. So I think it's important that even the skills that we introduce into our education sector should be skills that we're looking into the far future, not really the near future. Because remember, these kids are going to be in school for a good 12, 13 years. So you're looking at a good 20 years into the future. What skills will be needed then? Those are the skills you are teaching now. Now. So we need to be a situation where we're ahead of the curve in terms of education, so that by the time people catch up, we already have people, in line. That's where I was even talking about the last time, where you start exporting your labor force. You export 200-300 Zambians to the USA to go learn, to go work on batteries. They come back with income that will be contributed to the national budget. Next, we can go to transport, because transport ensures that goods and services reach their required destination, right? From the farms to the markets, from the markets to the retail stores, from the retail stores into your mouth, right? So we need to, and I think that will also work hand in hand with education, because as we mentioned, once energy and food is sorted out, even your workforce, your labor force starts to drive itself, right? People begin to start looking for jobs. There's productivity in the country, right? This one has gotten a contract to do this road, what. So it sort of feeds into the other pillars, right? Yeah. So with the transport, with
also health also. If you touch on health.
yeah, for sure. With an efficient transport network, you're able to first lower your cost of production, lower the cost of your goods. Why? Because you're not going into a rural area where your car can't pass, where you have to now start hiring people to go and collect bags, to go and collect the maize. Now they have to walk back. So you see, there are all those costs. You have to pay at toll gates. You have to get into the city. You have to do this. You have to do that. So all these costs sort of almost vanish once you have a good transport network system, right? And that now leads into our final aspect. Would you like to talk on that, Mr. Katongo?
Yeah, based on that one, once everything is put in place, and then we're going to see a situation whereby now funds, when it comes to now the health sector, you're looking at also taking care of the health workers. Going to see a situation whereby if the health worker is sent into a rural area, that person's standard of living is okay, because we cannot also forget about how can you send someone to a rural area when the standards of living are not there? It means that also using the way Mr. Dodia mentioned, the workforce is going to be improved. Not only that, also through research, we saw a situation in this area this year when America pulled out the foreign aid, but we shouldn't be dependent on that. If a country like Mr. Dodia mentioned, those pillars of the economy are being sorted out. We see a situation now, even the health sector will be well taken care of, and will be doing it on our own. And then those Zambians who are into doing just recently in Bino produce something for their skin.
Wow. Okay.
So you can tell that there's potential in investing in Zambians who are in medical research, if you so to say. So that can be also beneficial in the long run.
Yes, with the plant life
and everything, everything will be beneficial. And then we're going to see medicine being distributed in hospitals, clinics, and health sectors. And also taking care of now the urban doctors and nurses, where there's a situation where those volunteer health workers were left out. But it's good that they were
brought back in.
Back in, but it shouldn't be a situation whereby every time we have to wait for something to happen. But it should be an automatic thing whereby a law is put in place that those are well taken care of. And then we're going to see a situation now, all the health workers will be taken care of, and the health of Zambia is going to improve also. Having said that, I want Mr. Dodia to briefly tackle on, as you can see or hear that I'm bringing him back, because his points always, powerfully applied. At this particular time, I'll allow him to briefly tackle on environmental protection and also conservation, because it's important that we also factor in this issue.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Over to you, Mr. Dodia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. I almost forgot, actually. Yeah. Yes, and that is actually a very important area. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, we're seeing a situation now where mining is starting to affect our environment. It's starting to affect our water bodies, our livestock, and we need to start doing something about it. To be honest with you, I was quite disappointed to hear that a certain video production was not going to be allowed because a certain company did not allow it to be aired, because I think it's important that citizens access such information. How will they know what's happening in the country if they're not accessing that information? But anyway, in terms of conservation, we should look at how we can curb these disasters. What are we doing? What are we actively doing as the government, as citizens, in terms of obviously the disaster management and mitigation unit? What are their active roles in ensuring that these that these spills or mining disasters do not start affecting the rest of the population. As we know, even when the first mines were opened in Zambia, many Zambians were displaced from their areas. When the Zambezi Dam was being constructed, a lot of Zambians were displaced from their areas. We do not want a situation where displacement is happening because of poisoning and other sorts of chemical activity. So I think the best thing would be to obviously ensure that information is taken out there as efficiently as possible, and actually what's happening on the ground. And most importantly, responses are done accordingly, and not just responses, mitigation measures. We know that there's heavy mining in Solwezi. We know that there's heavy mining in the Copper Belt. We know that there's going to be heavy mining across the country with all the mines that we hear that are opening up. So we expect that the government will be on their toes in ensuring that even before these mines start being operational, that due diligence is done, fiduciary duties are carried out, that parameters are set in place on mining activities. I believe now is a time to set up a law that actually restricts or maybe prohibits certain mining activities with stated penalties. That way you can curb illegal activities like this. On a national scale, I believe that would be the best way to go. On an individual scale, I believe that as citizens, you have a duty to report if you feel that any activity could be hazardous to your area or to your environment. I mean, we can just take the example, like we mentioned before, of Kawe. There's lead poisoning there, and many people have to put pavers in their yards and this and that. They can't grow very many crops. So we can already see the devastating effects of these types of activities. So I believe as a citizen, as an individual, you have a duty to report anything that you might feel that may be hazardous to your health or to your environment or your community to the nearest police station or whoever that is your direct supervisor or reporting ward councillor that can actually be effective in dealing with the situations at hand. I believe those are the two aspects I would look at. Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo.
Let me add also, when it comes to the urban area, we see that there's this mindset that to want to do things when it's too late. The point I'm trying to bring out, the issues of cholera.
Yeah.
We see that ward councillors always wait when it's too late. So under environmental protection, I think it's important also that Zambians take up, like Mr. Dodia mentioned, take up this responsibility of making sure that the environments are well taken care of. If the ward councillors are not doing their jobs, they should find channels of reporting so that issues of cholera or waterborne diseases are not experienced. In fact, we shouldn't be hearing such stories in Zambia. And the issues of also floods also. We shouldn't be waiting for things to be bad. They should be proactive in that sense.
For sure.
So having said that, I think we have powerfully outlined the importance of environmental protection. It is also important to also add on the urban area. Having said that, I'll allow Mr. Dodia to give a recap of what we have looked at today. Over to you, Mr. Dodia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. And this has been a very good discussion. Thank you for joining us. The recap would be on, as this topic states, lessons learned and the pillars of sustainable development. Under the lessons learned, we looked at how our over-dependence on mining and a strong kwacha can affect other areas, and how we need to strike a balance between what is beneficial for private investors and what is actually beneficial for our people. Mr. Katongo, as he always brings up very important points of integrity and ethics, plays a very important role in dealing with these issues, because many of these issues will require you to forgo your ethical or moral values so that a private entity or a private investor can come and make money with you. So I think that's very important. And I think we need to learn from these lessons that we have been stuck with since independence, which we now label as Dutch disease. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's an over-dependence on one industry while the rest of your industrial sector suffers. So this is exactly what has been happening in Zambia. And in my observation, I believe it's still happening. We have this over-dependence on the mining sector to solve all our problems and a strong kwacha to help us with imports. But how does that affect our export market? And the damage, do we look at the downsides? So we always have this aspect of looking at the positives, but we don't look at the drawbacks. What are the drawbacks? Is it affecting the agriculture industry? Is it affecting our manufacturing, our production industry? Because those are undervalued as mining is overvalued. So we need to have a balance. Lessons learned, I think it's important that we need to have a balance between what is beneficial to the outside world, but what is also beneficial to us as Zambians, and focus on striking that balance and finding the sweet spot on how we can develop in other industries as well. The other aspect is pillars of sustainable development, which now answers those questions. We looked at how mining can filter into these other industries. We had explained that it's obviously not going to be a cheap venture, but it is worthwhile for the development of the greater national economy. We looked at areas such as energy, food, education, transport, and health, and how these 5 pillars need to be managed effectively and efficiently so that Zambia can be sustainable on its own, can stand on its own 2 feet, and not be dependent on foreign investment and foreign investors. I would like to end this podcast by saying that we need to develop a spirit of Ubuntu, bring it back, and ensure that we're in peace and unity. The idea of separation through tribe, through race, through color, oh, you're not a Zambian because you don't look like this, only divides us, and we cannot make any progress. It has been there since the beginning of Zambia, and it has only divided our people and has brought no development. So I'm hoping that we can, as we move forward, we can leave the past behind us and focus on developing a future and better Zambia. Thank you very much.
This has been the Real Talk with C&H, and I've been your co-host, Cyprian Katongo Jr., and Mr. Hussein Dodia has powerfully outlined what we'll be looking at today, lessons learned on the pillars of sustainable development, the episode 15. Join us next week for another powerful and interesting topic. Have a blessed weekend.